in a small coastal village nestled between the towering cliffs and the roaring sea. There lived a group of people who depended on the bountiful waters for their livelihood. The river that ran through the village was their lifeline, providing them with fresh fish and clean water for their crops. However, the villagers had become careless over the years and had started dumping their wastes and dirt into the river, polluting its once pristine waters. The sea goddess, who watched over the village from her watery domain, grew angry at the disrespect shown to her beloved river. She knew that she had to teach the villagers a lesson to make them understand the consequences of their actions, and so she decided to curse the village. One foggy morning, as the villagers woke up to go about their daily routines, they found themselves unable to move. It was as if an invisible force was holding them in place, preventing them from going about their normal chores. Panic spread through the village like wildfire, and the villagers soon realized that they were under the sea goddess's curse. As they trembled in fear, a shimmering figure rose from the waters of the river. It was the sea goddess herself, her eyes flashing with anger and determination. She spoke in a voice that boomed like thunder, echoing through the village. "You have desecrated my river with your filth and waste," she thundered. "For your sins, you shall pay a heavy price. From now on, before any woman in this village can bear a child, her husband must first lay with the mermaid twins who dwell in the depths of the sea. Only then can your wives conceive. This curse shall plague the land for generations," the sea goddess added. The villagers were horrified by the sea goddess's pronouncements. They knew the mermaid twins she spoke of. They were known as Omishewa and Omilewa. The mermaid twins were said to be the daughters of the sea goddess herself. With their long flowing hair and shimmering tails, they were the most beautiful creatures the villagers had ever laid eyes on. At first, the men of the village were hesitant to fulfill their strange and unsettling obligation to the mermaid twins. But as seasons passed and their wives grew desperate to bear children, the men had no choice but to succumb to the whims of Omilewa and Omishewa. The mermaid twins took full advantage of their power, demanding and receiving visits from the men on a regular basis. Their songs were said to be enchanting, capable of luring even the strongest of men to their watery domain. The men of the village found themselves drawn to the twins, unable to resist their siren call, and every day the men of Bankesa would line up at the water's edge, awaiting their turn to spend a night with the mermaid twins. As the curse continued to plague the village, the men reluctantly approached the mermaid twins, their hearts heavy with guilt and shame. The twins, with their hauntingly beautiful faces and seductive voices, beckoned the men to the edge of the ocean, where they lay on the rocks, waiting for the inevitable. The men closed their eyes and tried to pretend they were somewhere else as the mermaid twins lured them into their embrace. The air filled with a salty, intoxicating scent, and the men felt the cool touch of the twin scales against their skin. They could hear the soft whispers of the mermaids' voices, promising pleasure and ecstasy beyond their wildest dreams. But as the men succumbed to the mermaid's seduction, a sense of dread washed over them. They knew that their wives would soon be with child, and that they would have to live with the guilt of betraying their loved ones for the rest of their days. For some of the men, the ritual was a source of great excitement and anticipation. They viewed it as a privilege, a rite of passage that would ensure the continuation of their bloodline. But for others, the idea of sleeping with another woman, even a mythical one, before their wives could conceive, was a source of great anxiety and guilt. One such man was Alabi, a young fisherman who had recently married his childhood sweetheart Morenike, they had been trying for a baby for months, but so far their efforts had been in vain. For the newlywed couple, Alabi and Morenike, this tradition was a nightmare. 3 years into their marriage, and Morenike still couldn't conceive. Every month, when she got her period, she would cry and pray for a miracle. But it seemed that the Mermaid twins were not pleased with her husband, as he had not yet slept with them. Despite the pressure from the villagers, Alabi stood his ground and refused to sleep with the Mermaid twins. The villagers were outraged and accused Alabi of bringing a curse upon the entire village. They demanded that he fulfill his duty as a husband and sleep with the Mermaid twins. But Alabi stood firm in his decision. Morenike, on the other hand, was worried and feared that she would never be able to bear a child if her husband did not follow the tradition. This made Alabi feel powerless and conflicted. He loved his wife dearly and didn't want to betray her by sleeping with the mermaids. But he also wanted to fulfill his duty and give his wife the gift of motherhood. Alabi knew that the time was fast approaching for him to fulfill his duty to the village, but the thought of betraying Morenike just filled him with so much dread and guilt. As the years went by, Alabi watched as his friends and neighbors all had children of their own, while he and his wife remained childless. They had tried every remedy and prayer they could think of to conceive a child, but nothing had worked, and their home remained empty and quiet, haunted by the ghost of a child that never was. Alabi found himself unable to sleep, tormented by the visions of his wife's tears and disappointment. He knew that he had to find a way to fulfill his obligations to the village without betraying the woman he loved. One night, as the full moon shone brightly in the sky, Alabi decided to sneak out of his house and head to the river where the Mermaid twins were said to dwell. As he stood gazing out at the swelling waters below, he heard a soft, melodious voice behind him. "Are you here to seek our favor, young man?" Omilewa, one of the Mermaid twins, asked, a voice like a siren song. Alabi turned to see the two Mermaid twins floating before him, their tails shimmering in the moonlight. "I am," he replied, his voice trembling, "but I cannot bring myself to betray my wife. Is there no other way for me to fulfill my duty to the village?" Alabi asked. The Mermaid twins exchanged a knowing glance before turning back to Alabi with a smile. The twins started singing with their sultry voices, knowing fully well that no man can resist their enchanting voice. Alabi was fully intoxicated, and before he knew it, they made passionate love under the moonlight. Alabi felt a sense of guilt, but also a strange sense of fulfillment. To his amazement, the following month, his wife, Morenike, fell pregnant. The villagers rejoiced, and Alabi and Morenike became parents to a healthy baby boy. It seemed like the Mermaid twins had finally blessed their union. Omilewa and Omishewa reveled in the attention and adoration of the men, using their seductive charms to ensnare them in their web of desires. And as the year passed, the Mermaid twins grew bolder in their demands and insisted on sleeping with the men more than once in order for their wives to finally conceive, causing turmoil and unrest amongst the villagers. The villagers whispered and gossiped about the unnatural arrangements, but the fear of the curse kept them compliant. The Mermaid twins had become indispensable to the continuation of their bloodlines. So, the twins continued to take advantage of the twisted curse. They would lure the men into the depths of the sea with their enchanting voices and mesmerizing beauty. The men, unable to resist their charms, would willingly submit to their demands. And night after night, the mermaids would frolic in the waters with the men, leaving their poor wives at home, sitting with anger and resentment. One day, the wives gathered together and decided that they had had enough. They went to the elders of the village and begged them to intercede on their behalf. They pleaded with them to speak to the Mermaid twins and asked them to lift the curse that had been placed on the village. The elders were hesitant at first. They knew the power of the sea goddess and they feared the consequences of angering her. But they also saw the pain and suffering of the women in the village and knew that something had to be done. So, on a moonlit night, the elders made their way to the shore where the Mermaid twins were known to appear. They called out to them, their voices carrying over the crashing waves. The Mermaid twins emerged from the depths, their tails glistening in the moonlight. "Why have you come to us, elders of the land?" they asked in unison, their voices like a siren song. The elders explained the plight of the women in the village, how the curse had brought them nothing but sorrow and shame. They begged the Mermaid twins to have mercy on them and lift the curse that had been placed on the village. However, the mermaids were unwilling to listen to the pleas of the elders or the women of the village. They claimed that the curse was their mother's will and that they were bound to uphold it no matter the cost. The villagers were disheartened by the response of the Mermaid twins, realizing that breaking the curse would not be an easy task. Despite their efforts, the elders were unable to sway the mermaids from their curse, leaving the village in a state of despair and hopelessness. The wives of the village were not blind to the plight of their husbands, and their anger began to simmer even more as they watched their beloved spouses become entangled with the Mermaid twins. They knew that the curse was unjust, that the mermaids were using their beauty and power to manipulate the men for their own pleasure. The wives of the village got angrier day by day at the Mermaid twins. They felt betrayed by their husbands, who were forced to succumb to the curse in order to conceive a child. Determined to put an end to the curse and rid themselves of the mermaids, the wives banded together and sought out the help of a powerful sorceress who lived deep in the forest. The sorceress, a mysterious and ancient woman with piercing green eyes, listened to their plight with a knowing smile and devised a plan to lift the curse. She explained that in order to break the curse, the wives would have to undergo a powerful ritual that would fortify them against the wiles of the Mermaid twins. Without hesitation, the wives agreed to do whatever it took to end this suffering. She instructed the wives to sleep in coffins for 7 days and 7 nights to symbolize their rebirth and transformation. The women were hesitant at first, but they knew that this was their only chance to break free from the curse that had plagued their village for generations. And so, the sorceress led them to a hidden glade where 6 ornate coffins lay waiting. The wives were instructed to climb inside the coffins and sleep there for 7 days and 7 nights. As the wives lay in their coffins, they felt a strange sense of power coursing through their veins. They could feel their bodies transforming and strengthening, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. As the days passed, the village buzzed with gossip and speculations about the strange rituals the wives were undergoing. Some whispered of dark magic and sacrifice, while others feared for the safety of their beloved wives. But the wives remained resolute, trusting in the sorceress and her ancient powers to guide them through the darkness. Finally, on the 7th night, the wives emerged from their coffins, their eyes gleaming with newfound strength and determination. They were renewed and fortified by the sorceress's magic. They were no longer the meek and subdued women they once were. They were warriors, ready to face whatever challenges lay before them. Armed with newfound strength and determination, the wives set out to confront the Mermaid twins. Omilewa and Omishewa were lounging on the rocks by the sea, their tails shimmering in the sunlight as they basked in their own beauty. The wives approached them, their eyes filled with determination and fire. "We have come to put an end to this curse," one of the wives declared, her voice strong and unwavering. "We will no longer be subjected to your whims and demands. It is time for you to pay for the suffering you have caused our village." The mermaid twins laughed, their voices like tinkling bells as they dismissed the wife's threats. "You think you can defeat us?" Omishewa taunted, her eyes flashing with arrogance. "We are immortal beings of the sea. You are nothing but mere mortals." But the wives were not intimidated. They stood their ground, each one drawing upon the power and strength that the sorceress had bestowed upon them. With a collective cry, they lunged at the mermaid twins, determined to strip them of their tails and their mermaid nature. A fierce battle ensued, the sound of clashing waves and ringing voices filling the air. The mermaid twins fought with all their might, but the wives were relentless in their pursuit of justice. With each blow, they pushed the mermaid closer and closer to defeat. The wives fought tooth and nail against the mermaid twins. Omishewa and Omilewa, accustomed to getting their way, were taken aback by the sudden resistance of their adversaries. But the wives fought with a ferocity that surprised even themselves, refusing to back down. Finally, with a burst of energy and determination, the wives succeeded in stripping Omilewa and Omishewa of their tails. The mermaid twins let out a cry of anguish and despair as they felt their powers slipping away, leaving them vulnerable and weak. As the last rays of the sunlight faded from the sky, the twins transformed into mere mortals, their once beautiful tails replaced by 2 pairs of human legs. The wives stood triumphantly over them, rejoicing, their faces filled with satisfaction and pride. But they rejoiced too soon, because, unknowing to the wives, the sea goddess, who placed the curse on the villagers decades ago, watched with anger as the wives defeated her mermaid twin daughters, Omilewa and Omishewa. The goddess, with her flowing sea green hair and eyes that sparkled like the ocean, emerged from the depths of the sea and confronted the wives. She demanded that they pay for what they had done to her precious daughters. The wives, fearful but determined, used all their magical powers to fight back against the sea goddess. But the goddess was too powerful. With a wave of her hand, she caused a massive wave to crash against the shore, threatening to engulf the village and all who lived there. The wives knew they were no match for her wrath. Just as all hope seemed lost, a mysterious figure appeared on the horizon. It was the powerful sorceress that had fortified the wives with magical powers. The sorceress, with her long cloak and eyes that glowed with an otherworldly light, joined forces with the wives, and together they unleashed a barrage of spells and incantations, the air crackling with magic as they battled the sea goddess and her destructive forces. The sky darkened as lightning flashed and thunder rumbled, the very earth shaking beneath their feet. The sea goddess, furious at being challenged by mere mortals, fought back with all her might, but the wives and the sorceress were determined. In an epic showdown, the wives and the sorceress combined their powers together to create a barrier of light that surrounded the sea goddess, trapping her in the cage of energy. And with a cry of rage and defeat, the goddess vanished, carrying Omishewa and Omilewa, her mermaid twins, with her to avoid being destroyed by the wives and the sorceress. The wives walked back to their village, their heads held high, and their hearts filled with a sense of victory. Their village erupted into cheers and applause as the wives and the sorceress stood victorious, their faces shining with triumph and relief. The curse had been lifted, and the villagers could finally live in peace and harmony once more, thanks to the bravery and determination of the wives who had fought for their freedom. The moral lesson of this story are numerous. Firstly, we should learn to respect boundaries. The curse by the sea goddess wouldn't be in existence if the villagers had respected the sanctity of the river. Another major lesson is that we as humans are capable of more than we can imagine, as long as we are determined. The wives defeated their oppressors through determination. Make sure you share this video, like and subscribe. Girl power to the moon.
Never lose your faith in God. It will come true for you.